I'm Lynn.
I'm Amanda. And this is The Pursuit of Badassery, the podcast.
We're cutting through the fluff and cracking open what it really takes to build a business and life that you actually want.
No gurus, no gatekeeping, just real talk, big action, and the badass energy you need to scale and slay.
Some episodes, it's just us.
And sometimes we bring on powerful guests with stories that'll hit home.
Either way, this is not about playing small.
It's about going all in.
Let's get out. Hey there, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to The Pursuit of Badassery, the podcast. We have a guest who's coming back for a second time, Wendy Paige Sterling. Thank you so much for joining us. She is the founder of the new EI, which is Energetic Intelligence, and an intuitive leadership mentor and oracle for high-achieving women executives and entrepreneurs who are done performing their way through leadership and ready to lead from who they actually are. After 2 decades in corporate leadership, building West Coast offices from the ground up, Wendy made a very bold pivot, trading that corporate life for what is now her calling. What she discovered on the other side of that changed everything, that most of the stories that her clients were, living weren't really theirs. They were inherited stories passed down through generations, quietly kind of running the show in the background. So her work restores faith and trust by healing the generational patterns her clients unknowingly carried into their businesses, into their lives, into their relationships, into their leadership style, because you can't build from a legacy, from a story that was never yours to live. So through her proprietary DISCERN method, Wendy bridges the ancient wisdom with modern business leadership to help women step into that version of themselves that was always waiting on the other side of all that inherited weight. So Wendy, welcome back. We are so glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I'm excited to chat.
A lot has been going on behind the scenes and in the world with you. So catch us up. So if you want to, please watch the other podcast with Wendy because there's great nuggets. But what's been going on in your world? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, definitely watch the last one because it's been an evolution, but I think my core message has remained the same. What has shifted is really a lot of the work I've been doing on myself. I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to the work that we put out in the world is based on versions of ourselves that we have been in the past. And one of the things that I pride myself on is being 100% authentic and real where I'm at and in how I'm able to serve my clients. And so I have been on quite the journey since I was in Egypt about a year ago. And having been there last year, it really sort of tore open some wounds that I thought that I had healed. And what it ended up revealing was that there was such a deeper layer of trauma that I had not quite yet processed. But what I also came to quickly realize was never my trauma to begin with. It was actually trauma that was still from my family and my ancestors. And so for those of you who maybe haven't heard or don't know, I mean, I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors on 2 sides of my family. And so a lot of my grandparents' trauma of losing family members, being hidden on the run, and finally coming here to the United States sort of had its own special bag of nuances, we'll call them. And a lot of them got passed down to me. And while I was aware of some of them, what Egypt did was it pretty much ripped the Band-Aid off of all the ones that I couldn't hide anymore. And to be honest, it was also some of the trauma that my parents were still carrying that I was the recipient of. And so what I've really been doing is going head first. It's what I always do. I don't shy away from the work. All the work that I do on myself is the work that I then teach to my clients. And so what I had realized was that I was operating and had become quite the expert on emotional intelligence, right? EQ, EI. Emotional intelligence being learning a room and knowing how it is that I was going to fit into that room that I was going into, because that's really what I did my whole life. I was a people pleaser. I lived into the image and the role of who Wendy was. And it worked until last year, it started to not really work so good. And while I've always been someone who works with energetics, and I work, energetically with my clients to shift and alchemize their own energy to move things out of the way and to bring in new energy. What I had started to realize was that there was this whole other intelligence within us that is actually the secret to up leveling and really getting us to where it is that we want to go. It all kind of came together in this beautiful moment where I realized that it really was my intuition that built every single one of my businesses. It built my first 7-figure business. It built my next multiple 6-figure business. And as you read in my bio, my secret sauce in corporate was building multi-million-dollar regions from the ground up. It's what I do. And rather than fight that, I really started to lean into it. And so my intuition started leading me down the path of wanting to teach my clients the energetics of what is going to carry them to the next level. What and why I'm calling it the new EI, which is energetic intelligence, which helps my clients because it's ultimately what I started doing and started seeing my business grow and expand in exponential ways, which is instead of walking into a room and, molding yourself to the people that were there, instead what the new EI is all about, it's about being in your energy and noticing and watching how the room starts calibrating around you. And when I say that, I mean, it's all of a sudden the people that you're meant to interact with, the people that you're meant to, bring in as clients, they all of a sudden start just magnetizing towards you because they're attracted to something that you're putting out into the rooms that you're walking into. And so ultimately, what I have, put together and what you had talked about was the 7-step DISCERN method that really just names what everybody already does when they're deciding whether or not to lean in with their emotions, or if they decide that they're going to actually let their intuition and their energetics lead. Because every time I catch myself defaulting back into my old EI, what ends up happening is things feel harder, things feel like I'm in quicksand, versus when I lean into the new EI, it's really, that's where the flow happens. It's where you're in the surrender and the faith, and then all of a sudden things just like the floodgates start opening. And so I've really perfected the way in which my clients and myself have been able to do that. And so staying true and authentic to who I am, that's how I've really started to pivot my business, because ultimately it's not until you realize that what's been blocking you was never yours to begin with, that when you change your beliefs, your decisions change and your energy shifts as well, which then attracts the money and the wealth and all the things that you desire. So here we are.
Love that evolution. I definitely want everyone to go back and listen to the last podcast because a lot of things have changed. You're talking about these inherited patterns and this weight that is not ours. Like, how does that show up in entrepreneurship and leadership? Because it shows up differently than it just would in, your daily life.
Absolutely. I mean, although I will say that it manifests differently in our daily life, and it's typically what that undercurrent is. And so what I tend to see, and what even I've experienced as I've been navigating leadership, is the first sign is really that when things that used to work really well, all of a sudden are not necessarily working so well for you. And a lot of times when that first step happens, what then sort of, dovetails on top of that is then all of a sudden you start outsourcing your knowledge to people, where you start picking up the phone and you start asking, a million other people, what do you think of this? Or do you see me making this business decision or making this business move? And you start really outsourcing some information where usually it within yourself and you'll move really fast. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my clients that end up coming to work with me have said, God, I was in my 20s. I used to make these decisions and things used to happen super fast. And I try to do that now. And all of a sudden, it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because you are not the same person that you were at that time. And rather than thinking that something is actually wrong with you, it's really about recognizing that you've up leveled, and what used to work when you were at such a, I'll call it a lower vibration level, like a lower frequency, it's of course not going to work when you're up at this higher level frequency. And so what ends up happening is my clients start realizing that what used to work doesn't, what used to feel good doesn't feel good anymore. And so instead of outsourcing and wondering, why is the triangle not fitting in the square box? It's realizing, oh, wait, I need to find a new box that I'm supposed to be in. And it's in that place where all of a sudden people also start to get really uncomfortable because we have this weight on our shoulders of so and so depends on me, or what's going to happen to my 401k, or what's going to happen to my kids, or what's going to happen to my reputation that I've spent this much time. And so what ends up happening is you start talking yourself out of what is going to get you to the next level. And so if you're somebody who finds that you're either on the hamster wheel, you're chasing your tail, you're outsourcing information and data, that is your first sign to recognize that your old intelligence isn't going to get you to where it is that you want to go, and it's time for an upgrade.
So you have these high-powered women that you work with that are like CXO levels and definitely movers and shakers who have accomplished a lot. They come to you and you're like, listen, where you were making those decisions and that disconnect and where you are now is a change in the vibration. Sometimes we can get super protective of the identity that we feel that we have, that we've built, the one that we're still attached to, which could be the old identity. How do you walk women? Because even when they come to you and say, I feel off, how do you get them to listen? Because it's not an easy process. And I'm saying this from experience because it is something that I actively do. We actively do with up-leveling and different things. And so tell us how you kind of navigate that because it's not easy. Listeners, if you're going through it, we understand it is not easy, but it is worth it.
Man, is it worth it? And it's not always sunshine and rainbows. And I think that that's what keeps us avoiding or just altogether just saying never mind, because it isn't sunshine and rainbows. I mean, what I have experienced and what I watch my clients experience is that it winds up being sort of this up and down roller coaster that they're going to be going on. And, it's funny. I just had my mastermind group, and one of my clients, she was like, oh my God, like, here we go again. Like, I thought we were through this, and like, oh, she's like, more work, but not in like a negative way, but she was like, but I was just getting so comfortable, in this place. And so the first thing that I always have to tell my clients is you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's just the way that it works. And in that, there's that reframe around, instead of seeing discomfort as something negative, I always try to instill neutrality to my clients around discomfort, because truly what is on the other side is going to be way better than where it is that you are today. And, a lot of times I will invite clients to even think of other times where, they've thought the worst, and then all of a sudden, sure, it didn't happen the way they thought, but it wound up like being even better than what they had expected. The other thing that I talk to them about as well is that they've been operating this way for so long, they're not getting what it is that they want. And the results are either out of reach or they're getting different results than what it is that they want. I always try to reframe the situation or, reframe the discomfort for them, because it's almost like, people just assume the worst and hope for the best. Well, why don't you actually assume the best and hope for better, right? So it's always in the discomfort that the universe then takes over and better things happen. And so if you are continuing to operate at this particular identity it's like you banging your head against a wall, is that comfortable? Is that where you want to be? Is this how you want the rest of your life to go? Versus like, what if you just give it a try? And a lot of times the hesitation comes because they're at A, right? And they're looking at Z, the outcome that they desire. And they're going A to Z. Are you crazy? And what I do, and I do really well with my clients, is I'll say to them, well, sure, Z is the vision, but you're at A. So what's B? What is A to B? And it could be as simple as doing research. It could be something as simple as picking up the phone and calling someone who is in that role in another company and just getting their perspective on the position, right? And we psych ourselves out because we're thinking about the destination instead of being in the present moment. And what I find is that when they're able to break it down into more bite-sized pieces around how their identity is going to start shifting, that's when they start getting excited, because once they take that first step, then all of a sudden they start feeling the momentum behind them. And then they're like, okay, what's C? Okay, what's D? Like, wait, I can't wait till we get to F. And so just slowing it down is crucial in that process, and getting my clients to just reframe the journey instead of focusing on the destination of where they want to go.
Yeah. That's a big change in your perspective and how you're looking at just the world in general. I mean, there's a lot of things there that there's so much to unpack in that one little area. One of the things that I want to really unpack with you is that we are in this performative space. Like, what does performing your way through leadership really look like to the average person? Or even to the executives in the room? Why are so many women over functioning and then like shocked when they go into burnout?
Well, because that's how society has trained us to be, right? I mean, I spent 2 decades in corporate performing. I'll even go as far as to say I spent 4 decades, the first 4 decades of my life, performing for my family and for my bosses and companies that I worked for. And I truly believe that we embrace performative energy because it's what's expected and it's what's been handed to us. I do believe that that's a big reason, or a big way in which people have been conditioned to be and how to lead in corporate and in their businesses. Because, I do think that it's part of what I'm here to shift for women, especially women in leadership, because it works until it doesn't. And burnout is a great sign of why something isn't working for you anymore. If you're in burnout, to me, that means that you are in performative energy. And when you are in that place, that's your signal to be able to say, wait a second, this doesn't work for me anymore. And the performative energy tends to align itself with feelings in your body where you may feel fear or you may feel anxiety or tension. What I teach my clients to learn for themselves is learning where it is in their body they feel burnout, fear, performative energy, stress. Because 9 times out of 10, that is a completely different place on their body than when they lead with, oh, when your intuition speaks to you, where do you feel that? And it's in a completely different place. It feels completely differently. And so it's part of what I teach them in discerning between performance energy versus, inner knowing, I'll call it, is figuring out where in your body the two are activating themselves within you. And so once you're able to identify that, all of a sudden you start paying attention and going, oh, wait a second. This isn't me. This is something, there's a story here. This is fear. I'm feeling anxious. Or your intuition, for me, I feel fear like in my throat and my chest. And then I feel my intuition. It's kind of like in my sacral, and it kind of vibrates up to my heart and does this little pitter patter thing very fast. And so I always know the difference. And so instead of panicking when I feel fear, I just start getting curious about it. And the more that you start getting curious about it, you find yourself almost like cooling or like minimizing the pressure that you're putting on yourself to just really get clear around like, what is it about this that doesn't work for me anymore? And I find that that's the hardest piece, is really forcing ourselves to slow down, because burnout to me just fuels more burnout. You don't feel like you can ever get rid of it. And so a lot of times people go down, I was burned out in corporate. I was miserable. I was a miserable person to be around back in the day. And it wasn't until I started to recognize that that's what was going on and started taking back control over my body and recognizing what did or didn't feel well. That's when everything shifts for my clients. It's when everything started to shift for me as well. And so instead of seeing the slowdown and the pause as something negative, to actually see it as something positive that's going to relieve them of that stress and the burnout and allow them to actually operate from a deeper knowing within versus being in the expectations or the conditioning that was handed to them that, again, same thing, it wasn't theirs to begin with.
A couple of things came up when you were talking there. First of all, like getting them out of the reactive, like the patternization of what they are. So out of their head, getting them out of their head and into their body. And that's a grounding sense. And even if we're not woo woo, whoever's not woo woo on this, but even if you're a sports maniac, like they want you to embody your full body, like feel all of it. And so it's like being in your body and it's key. And then you can have the discernment of where it's at, why it's doing that, and then be able to have more ownership of what is happening and directive of what is happening versus allowing it to be just the forefront of the thought. But one of the visuals that came, and maybe this is just because in one of my workout classes, we were talking about this, is, when a lot of us don't use our full capacity of our brain, but our lungs, we were talking about our lungs, and like we train, and actually it feels like all my Instagram is about like the rib cage that goes out. And I've been trying to train my rib cage because in some of my pictures I've noticed, and I remember going through this process with my Pilates instructor a decade ago, but we train ourselves, we're only using the front part of our lungs because we're holding our stomachs and we're doing all of the things to be performative, right? And so but over time, the rest of our lungs don't get the breath. Like it's harder and harder unless you focus to breathe into it. And what you're doing is you're not allowing your body to work at its complete capacity, like its ability to be able to do all of the things. And so as you were talking, that's what I was thinking is like, because I know the women that you work with, they're uber successful, like in the high 6 figures to 7-figure people, like they're movers and shakers, thought leaders in the world, and they're incredible. And even though that they've had all the success, even if they don't want more success, there can be an ease to it. There can be more of an ownership and a connectivity to that. There can be so many different things when working with you and more success if that's what they want. And I think even by default, some will still have more success. And obviously success is a personal definition, but because they're embodying, they're no longer allowing the narratives either from this generation or the past generations to control the outside, to be able to dictate. It's all coming from within, from a healthy within side. And I love that.
Yeah, no, as you were talking, it's interesting because in a lot of the work that I do with my clients, one of the things that I do with them does involve me inviting them to start paying attention to their breath and paying attention to where it is that they are actually breathing from. Because I think a lot of times we hold our breath or we find ourselves breathing so shallow. And it's amazing what ends up happening when you're able to really regulate your nervous system, even just through breath. By breath alone, you're able to get yourself a little bit more out of your head and way more into your body. And I mean, I've had people say to me before, like, oh, I've done this work before and I've never been able to like get into my body, but I don't know what you did. Like there's something that you just did that like allowed me to quiet the noise in my head and for me to really go in and to start paying attention. And I agree with you. I think that, especially with the clients that I work with, I mean, they have so much going on in their head at any given time. I mean, I know you both have a lot going on in your heads at any given time, knowing the many hats that, we all wear on a daily basis. And what I try to teach my clients is that instead, I think that the reason that we breathe so shallow or why we may be holding our breath so often is because we're putting on these different hats. Like I was using this example with one of my groups the other day where, there's this kid's book that it's like hats for sale, right? And you see this man with all these hats. Like it was a book I used to read my boys when they were younger. And that's what we do is we see all these different roles as different hats that we're putting on. And what I always tell my clients is that's an illusion. There's just one hat and all the roles you play make up the different, seams of the hat, let's say, or the different threads that are in the hat, but you're always wearing the same hat. And we make ourselves feel so much more pressure when, we're like grabbing, and that's why we're out of breath and we're doing all these things. But once you start realizing that it's one and the same, it actually kind of allows people to really start to understand the concept of it. But then, of course, they're like, well, how do I do that? Tell me how to do that. And that is where this type of work comes into play, where, getting out of your head really takes conscious practice. It's like any muscle you build when you're at the gym. But it takes practice for you to be able to rewire how it is that you function. So many times they're like, but if but a ball's going to drop. Or what if a ball drops? And I always say to them, the ball never drops. The ball bounces off of your foot and comes right back up if, God forbid, it does drop. But the clients I work with, I'm like, you never drop a ball. Why do you think doing this way is going to drop a ball? Well, because it's not the way I've always done it. Well, okay, when you've done it differently, have you ever dropped a ball? Well, no, of course not. Well, of course not, right? And so, we're so powerful with our stories that when you really dig down, they're BS. Like, they're not even true. And even if they were, the story is probably based on a 20-year-ago version of you that is not even the person that you are today. And so, I love that you brought that up, Lynn, because I think that, it's important for people to understand and to realize that, like, it's never too late to retrain. And with the results that I've seen for myself and all of my clients is you wind up actually getting even better results, and the results come in a lot faster when you do it a different way.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get the results that you're looking for, the new results, doing the same old thing that you were always doing before. I mean, you have to do things differently in order to see that change. It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And the same goes for how you present yourself, how you are aligned in your business, how you lead, all that intuitive leadership, all that. You have to do things differently if you want to see the different results. And the problem with that is that it is scary and it is uncomfortable. And you said it yourself. We say it all the time. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because growth does not come from the comfort zone. It never has, never will. I'm looking forward to the day that one day somebody, that it actually happens where it can be comfortable and see great change, but it never comes. They never come together, unfortunately.
No. And I don't know, like, even for my own personal example, I'll say, I wiped out my entire support coaching team that has been with me for years. And that was terrifying to me. But I got the download that it was time for new people, new everything. And it's but how do I let go of all these people that I've been working with for so many years? And, and I leaned in and I trusted. Was it terrifying? Absolutely. Because they've been my parachute for God knows how many years, right? But it was so crystal clear when the changes needed to be made. And, listen, I could go back to that moment and be like, oh, I played it safe and I'm still in the same place I was a year before, which is not where I wanted to be in my business. And instead, I'll say, I made some really big shifts in my support and in the people that I chose to work with about 6 months ago. And I kid you not, I have had exponential growth and change in just a 6-month period in taking the bold step and completely changing out my back end of who I leaned on for all different parts of my business and even my personal life. And so I say that to just inspire people that, was it terrifying to basically wipe a slate clean and kind of start with some new people? Absolutely. I was like, what am I doing? And at the same time, I was like, you know what? But things can't keep going like this. I can't keep doing it this way anymore because it's not working. And what's the worst that's going to happen? Give myself 6 months to a year to see what happens. It sure as hell couldn't get worse. And it only stood to get better. But it's really in reframing the discomfort that enables you to get out of your own damn way, and we are the problem. We stand in our own way so many times. And I'll say it this way. We think we're in the way because we think that the voice that is telling us not to do something or not to make a move is us. It's not. It is someone from some part of your life or a past life, if you believe in that. It is something from your past that doesn't belong to you. And this is why I love what I do, because I love letting people know, like, this wasn't yours. This wasn't your story. You just think it's yours because it's coming from your head. But that voice is not you. What if your voice said something different? What if your voice had a different perspective? And it's in those moments where when you start realizing, like, oh, wait a second, you're right. Like, who did I get this from? And I mean, that's part of the work I do, is trying to figure out where it does come from so that we can go back to source and be able to clear it out and shift the belief. However, when you stand in the ownership of knowing that, wait a second, that's actually not me, and you can distance yourself from it, that's when you start, like, it's almost like the image that I'm seeing. It's like all of a sudden the sunlight starts shining through of possibility of, oh, wait, there's actually another way. There's another thought. And that's what just gets me really excited and why I love doing this work.
I love that you love doing this work. I just want to plant one more seed with the audience. I don't know if they caught it. So we're talking about like the change, the discomfort of change, like that growth. Also having to clear the slate, understanding where that resource is coming from. But there was a small thing that we touched on but wasn't said outright, is also creating the space for different. So it's like spring cleaning those beliefs. It's like, because when we can like get rid of the bullshit stories, and I say that with love, but you know, the bullshit stories that no longer serve us, or whatever that is, in a physical and an emotional and a spiritual level, then we have and like you said, you clean the slate of the people around you, and you made room for the growth. And a lot of times when we want change, we're okay with the discomfort of change. There's a lot of times where we're not willing to make the room for the growth and for the evolution. And you've touched on that several times. I just want to make sure that the audience understands, like, it's a process. And that's why having people such as yourself to walk them through the things that need to be done or that they want to do in order to get to that next level, to get their vibration up to where it needs to be, is uber important, because it's simple, but it's complex. Like there are things that need to be done, and it's the action that it is in that support mechanism, but cleaning the slate, making the room for that growth to happen.
Yeah, it's a great distinction. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have the time. How do I do that? You know, and I always come back to, well, we make time for what's important to us. And if it's important, you'll figure it out. You'll find it. And, you know, I'll tell you guys, like, I mean, I've started what my husband thinks is the craziest thing in the world, which is I wake up at like 5 a.m. every day now. And I used to not wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I do. I wake up at 5 a.m. now because I have come to realize and value the quiet time in my house before everybody gets up, before I have to deal with the dog, get my oldest off to school. And, you know, is it not fun to wake up at 5 a.m? Guys, it's not really fun for me to wake up when it's still dark outside. Like, I am not that person. However, I will tell you, ever since I started doing that, I have found that my days start a lot more calm. I don't feel like I'm waking up and rushing. And, you know, it is a decision that I have made. And it is a decision that I have made, to your point, Lynn, is to make the space, to make the time, because I know what that is going to give me in the long run. And I don't feel like my days are anywhere near as exhausting as they used to be when I woke up later. And it's because I start my day in such a more calm way. And so I say that because there is the possibility for you to figure it out and to make the space and to make the time. It's just a matter of, like, you know, how bad do you want it? And are you, how do I want to say this? It's like, how bad do you want it? Right? Like, how driven? Because if it's not something that you are like ride or die on, then what the hell are you doing? Like, why do we wake up and go to work and have clients and do all this stuff? Like, why? And I get it. I've been in those places a couple of times where I'm like, I do not want to do this anymore. It's why I left divorce coaching, because I was like, I don't want to do that. I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't passionate. It didn't get me up. But like when it's something that you are really just oozing passion for, you will figure it out. So one other thing is that maybe you're not making the space for it because it's truly not something that you are passionate about. Maybe it's still something that's expected of you or a natural progression. That's also information that you get to sit with. But if you're not giving yourself the space or the time, then you're never going to know. And I think that's also why a lot of people, kind of take these side steps. I don't like to call them steps backwards, but they take kind of these steps to the side because they're not truly giving themselves enough time to really discern the difference. And what I love to see is when you're stepping forward.
Love that. There's so much that we covered in this episode. Is there any one last thing that you want to leave the audience with today?
I feel like we've covered so much today. There's something I do want to say, which is, and I hear this a lot, and that is, so many people will say like, oh, I'm not intuitive. That's not me. And I want to encourage everybody listening to, as Lynn, you said at the beginning, success means different things to everybody. Intuition means something different to everybody. And whatever that nudge is, intuition is not something that you use. Intuition is something that you are born with. It is something that it is innate in every single one of us. And I really would just invite you guys, if there's one thing that you can start doing today, is to start paying attention to how your body is reacting, responding in those moments where you are either in a pivot, in a decision, against a crossroads, whatever it is. Just notice your body. And then of course your head is going to start, logic starts creeping in, immediately. But just to really start paying attention, because your body is where your intuition lives and it is talking to you, and to just start recognizing and acknowledging it. That's it. Just acknowledge where and when your body is speaking to you, because at the end of the day, that is where you get to lead from, not from up here anymore. It's really from body first and then creating the narrative from there instead of vice versa. So that's what I'd like to leave everybody with.
Yay. Before we close up, you have a new interview series coming up. I'm super excited to hear. Can you just tell us a little bit about it? And obviously we'll put the links and different things in there, but tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my God. I'm really excited about this. It is a huge passion project for me. So it is called The Decisive Edge, and it is an 18-part, because there will be 18 amazing Jewish women in business who will be interviewed. And I am beyond thrilled at the caliber and the level of women that are going to be coming into the room. And I'm going to be sitting down with them so that they can start sharing with me and my audience about some stories that they don't always tell. And I mean the ones that have been passed down through the generations, the ones that have shaped how they think, how they decide, and how they lead. And the spicy part of it is really the ones that have prevented them from making moves or that have actually saved them, believe it or not. And as somebody who was raised in a Jewish home, there's so much that has been passed down to us that we not only pass down to our kids, but it's also impacted the way that we lead. And so what I'm really interested for these women to come into this room and to share with me is to start telling their stories, to start naming, what it is in their lineage, the wisdom that has been passed down. And so that they get the opportunity to, I will say, my hope in our conversations is to find healing through the conversation and the stories that they share with me live. So I can't wait. And I've already got a lot signed up. So it's going to be a high caliber of women. You guys are not going to want to miss it.
Very excited to hear. Can't wait to hear the interviews. And I've seen some of the women that are on that list. So I'm very excited. And these are like movers and shakers people. So we can definitely learn. Wendy, thank you so much for jumping on our podcast again. We love talking with you. Obviously, you're part of our badass community. You're on lots of things with us. We love having you always.
Oh, I love you guys so much. Thank you for having me again. And you guys are the best. I love you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. If this episode resonated with you, don't just listen and move on. Take a minute today and ask yourself, like, what am I carrying that no longer belongs to me or that never belonged to me? And reach out to Wendy. Scroll down, find her show notes and all the information there, because you'll definitely want to stay connected with what Wendy is doing.
Yeah, and send her a message. Let her know what stood out to you and maybe even have a conversation with her. But again, Wendy, thank you so much. We can't wait to hear the interview series. And everybody, till next time,
get after it.
Thanks for tuning in. But remember, listening is not doing.
Take what you heard today and move.
Share the episode, leave us a review, and tag us when you take action.
Head over to thepursuitofbadassery.com and see how we're helping entrepreneurs get results without the fluff.
Until next time,
Let's get after it.